Thank you. Well, as I guess you know, my name's Zoë Slattery. What you may not know is that I've spent my life working for large companies. I've worked for 3 very big companies over the last 40 years. Right now, I work for a very small company. I am the single employee, I'm the managing director, I'm the CTO, and it's great. But it gave me a chance to reflect on some of the things that I'd seen in the companies that I worked for. And so I put this talk together. I work with developers a lot. I've always worked with developers. You guys, you're all developers, right? How many developers do I have in the room? Yeah, okay. So universally, you and I complain about managers. This is, I feel, a chance for me to put the large corporate manager's point of view. Now I don't know how to advance the slides. Try that. It's not. Cool. In this talk, I'm going to skip through personnel management, managing delivery of product, legal stuff, and I'm doing it in a fairly random order. It's the way it came together when I wrote it down on the plane on the way to ApacheCon, where I tried to give it to some Americans who have a slightly different sense of humour. So, anyway, this is the way it worked out. So let's start off. I am a manager in a large corporate organisation. Motivation is key. There is nothing more important than motivation to having a happy, healthy, productive working environment. Now, as a manager, you will get sold many ideas about motivation. It's usually a consultant, and they want to sell you a team building course, some education, a book. Forget it. It is no use to you. The tools you need are simple. They're tried and trusted methods. And you will find this theme a lot through my talk. My favourite, the carrot and the stick. I beat people with a stick until they deliver. And if that doesn't work, the threat of unspeakable acts with a sharpened carrot is very motivating. Oh, backwards. No. Okay, let's talk about development sizing. How do you plan what you're going to deliver and when? Now, I've seen this fashion recently. It's been pretty popular in companies that I have worked for, of planning poker. So the team sits round, dish out the cards. Who plays planning poker? Right, you all hand out cards, right? Everybody takes a guess at how long something's going to take to deliver, and then you kind of have a bit of a discussion and you average out the guesses and come up with an answer. It kind of ignores the fact that there might be 1 or 2 people in the room who actually have done something like it before and know. And it's kind of, well, I suppose this sort of thing keeps the developers occupied and happy. I mean, they even give me a vote. So I say how long I think things are going to take. It's kind of okay. Oh, and they do it all in story points, which, of course, they think, I don't know, are actually working days. But, of course, I do, but I don't say anything. Anyway, as I said, it's a bit of a diversion because, you see, the problem with all of these things is the only person who knows how long it's going to take to deliver is me. You know why? That's what I've agreed with the executives. Don't bother with planning. Right, how do you measure productivity? Well, there are lots of ways to do this. Again, I keep it pretty simple. So, the average C developer, let's take a C developer for example, delivers 4,000 lines of code a year. So, the average developer should deliver 100 lines of code a week. So that's it. They sit at their desks till they've written 100 lines of code. Done. And it delivers. Our executives love these charts. They keep going up, right? I can do a plan and an actual, and it keeps going up. So it's the best way to measure development productivity. Software testing. Well, it's a nice idea, but you know there's no point. You know why? Well, I mean, from my point of view, it gets in the way of your delivery targets, so that's not good. But to really understand why there is no point, you have to understand a little bit about our corporate strategy. Our corporate strategy ensures that we put our first-line product support, and we deliver large products. Our first-line product support is based in cheap country of the year. Cheap country of the year gets the mission to support all our products at the beginning of the year. After 6 months, they can handle the have you turned it on yet kind of problem. The chances of any customer actually being able to report a bug which gets through to us are zip. At the end of the year, we move product support to the next cheap country of the year because it's cheaper than the last one. Don't worry about software testing, no point. Okay, let's talk a bit about programming languages. Well, the good news is, for enterprise software delivery, there is only one right programming language, and it's Java. It's Java because it takes this many lines to open a file and read it, and if you do it in PHP, it takes this many lines. This helps with our delivery targets. It also helps to deliver serious, weighty, enterprisey software. People feel comfortable when they get something that's big, and you get something that's big with Java. Of course, if you PHP guys want to be taken seriously, you can write Java PHP that looks like Java, and, well, I recommend it. Okay, let's go back to another personnel subject. Feedback. Everybody needs feedback. And you know what the two most important things are about feedback? It needs to be timely and accurate. So I have this completely nailed. Timely. Once a year, right? Same time every year, everybody knows when they're going to get their feedback. Accurate. Well, it's easy. I have my lines of code they've delivered in a spreadsheet. I divide the team into 3 because I have a quota. I get a quota of people I have to tell they're not performing to. So I divide my team into 3. I tell the top third that they're doing okay. You know, keep delivering, you're doing fine. I tell the next third that they need to work harder, more lines of code, not going home till you've done more lines of code. And I tell the bottom third that they'll just be fired if they don't perform better, and we'll put them on a performance improvement plan. And they find that exceedingly motivating. Yep, it's a really good strategy for a happy team. Also, if you can arrange your annual feedback to just after Christmas, then it wrecks their Christmas worrying about it. We do that. Education. Now, I am a huge fan of education. Huge. I work for the team that employs graduate developers. We only employ educated developers. When I hire them, I talk to them about whether they've done some partying. I really only employ people that have got partying out of their system. Because when they join our company, they're not going to get any more education or any more partying. So I have to make sure that they are pre-educated. They do, of course, they try and tell me that they want to go to conferences. Now, of course, I know that a conference is just an excuse for another piss up with your friends. So there is absolutely no way I would ever send my developers to a conference. Crazy. But I wouldn't want you to think we don't have a technical career path. We do. We have an excellent technical career path. To progress in our company, you do not have to be a manager. So in our technical career path, we do, of course, give people the education that they need. We need our technical career path to grow chief technology officers. In our organisation, we have a chief technology officer in each department, and they are the sort of 400-pound gorilla of technology. The reason we need these guys is because when it comes to getting funding, they need to fight it out with the other chief technology officers. So we really need these guys to be pretty well, pretty good, pretty beefy to fight the other guys. Their weapon of choice for these fights is PowerPoint. So we give intensive PowerPoint training all the way through our technical career path. By the time you get to this end of it, you can talk for 10 hours without hesitation, repetition, or deviation. You can do 10 bullet points per chart with a size 12 font. It's perfect. And it's very good for customers as well. If you have a bad customer, you put one of these guys in front of them. They are invaluable. So let's talk about software law for a bit. It's the bane of the enterprise developer's problem. Well, basically, I divide developers into three for this as well. Actually, I don't mind if people copy code. Why would I? As long as it, contributes towards our development targets, I don't care where they copy it from. The good ones, if they find any kind of nonsense about licenses in, just cross it out. Right? I don't want any of this shit in my code repository. So copy it, get rid of the licenses. That's my best developer. Right, my second best developer is not quite so smart. The first best developer gets rid of the comments. The second one leaves comments in there. Now, I don't mind people commenting their own code. If they want to do it in their own time, that's fine. But copying other people's comments is stupid. Now, I don't know how many of you have been involved in sort of legal assessments of code. But if you take a lawyer and you get them to go through code to figure out whether it's been copied or not, they don't look at the code. They look at the comments. They look for the spelling mistakes. Basically, a spelling mistake is the best identifier of copied code. So my second best developer forgets to remove these. My third developer, my least favorite developer goes to the company lawyer and says, "Can I copy this code?" No, don't do it. It's more process for me, for everybody, for you. It's a waste of time. So the best thing to do, copy anything you want, remove the licenses and the comments. You're good. Now, I feel I ought to say something about diversity. If you hadn't guessed, I am a cat herder. I herd cats for a living. I'm very good at it. I don't care whether they're black cats, brown cats, tabby cats. They're all herd pretty much the same. But I have a new problem. Somebody in our HR department has recently told me that I have a quota, which I have to fill, of lady cats. I need a lady cat on my development team. Have you seen what boy cats do when you put a lady cat in with them? This is absolutely insane. But I have a solution. I promote the lady cats to management positions. In fact, some of our best executives are lady cats, and my problem is solved. Okay, this is almost the last slide. I worked for IBM for 24 years. Some of that was based on IBM, but quite a lot of it wasn't. Some of it was based on the big companies that I visited while I worked for IBM, and I'm talking to other developers. So don't go away from this talk thinking that IBM is somewhere you'd never work. Also, every point on that slide had some grain of truth in it, wildly exaggerated in some cases, and only one slide was absolutely 100% true with no twisting by me. I wanted to talk about it because I think managing developers is one of the biggest problems that our industry has. I think it's not, we don't understand that, or our managers don't understand that this is a creative profession. You need to treat people who are creating things differently from the way you treat a production line. And many of the things that I've seen go wrong are because people are being treated, creative people are being treated as though they worked on a production line. And I think it's a huge problem for the delivery of reasonable, decent quality code, which is what we really want to do in the end. So I have one wrap-up slide, which is, I'm being kind of serious now. I don't know whether anyone was reading Slashdot or the ridiculous rags over the past few weeks, but there was a patent filed by IBM in June this year on the automated analysis of a code developer's profile. Now, the idea of this patent is that you take a lot of tools and you look through your Git repository or Subversion, and you make assessments at how well a developer is doing based on this. This is just the worst idea I have ever heard. I mean, even on Slashdot, it's retweeted, this is a terrible idea. It is a terrible idea. I hope the only good thing that comes out of IBM patenting it is that nobody ever uses it. But what was mainly misunderstood in the reporting of this was it was treated as though it came from IBM management. It actually doesn't. The two guys who did this are engineers, and they're not very senior engineers. And if you look at it from their point of view, IBM encourages patents, encourages people to patent things, so you get brownie points for patents. And they suddenly realise there's a whole bunch of data here that they can analyse and play with. And I'm an engineer. If somebody gives me a bunch of data and I can analyse it and play with it and patent something, I'll do it. I'm not thinking about what a fucking stupid idea it is. So what it comes back to is really all of us, me especially. I'm an engineer first. I should really never have been a manager. I was a manager for 6 years, and in all honesty, I knew right at the beginning that I'm interested in solving engineering problems. People are not my primary interest. So the best thing you can all do if somebody offers you a job as a manager is sit down and think, do you really care enough about people? Because if you're a manager, if you're going to be a good manager, they have to be your primary interest. Getting the best out of every single individual that works for you, whether you like them or not, has to be your focus. If you know it's not going to be, turn down that job because it's not right for you. The other thing, I suppose, is that if you are in a situation where you see terrible management, you can do what I suppose I spent most of my time doing, which is to try and change it. That works, but it's bloody hard work. Changing these practices is difficult. And in fact, what I observed is that some of the senior technical staff were actually better at changing the practices than the managers trying to change it whilst being a manager. And of course, the other thing you can do is if you're stuck with one of these situations where you've got terrible management, is you can leave, because the more I look around, the more there are plenty of companies, usually the smaller ones, I have to say, that understand how to manage people properly. Okay, that's all I had to say. Yeah, if anybody's got any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Guys, any questions? Anything for Zoe? Down back there.
How do you deal with corporate politics, and how do you actually circumvent masquerading some of the problems you might necessarily have from them?
How did I deal with it? Not terribly effectively most of the time, I think. So I had two strategies of dealing with it. If something was so bad that I couldn't go on colluding with it while I was a manager, I resigned. So I did that. I had a job where I thought the practice was so bad that I resigned from a management position and said, no, I'll go back to doing a technical job. The more effective way to do it is decide what you want done and find a good executive sponsor and get them to help you make that change. And that's really the best strategy. But of course, you have to find the good executive sponsor first, and that's it's not always that easy.
Anyone else?
From your big company experience, what are the main things that you've brought into your tiny company experience now?
I give myself a talking to every morning. And basically nothing. I was thinking about this. The things I most miss about a big company are I miss the teamwork. And the things I most love are that I wake up every morning and think, what shall I do today? Write some more code. You gradually replace the teamwork by doing things like this. So being part of the organising committee for this conference was part of my A team, and I've got other teams. But I don't, there's nothing much that I would wish to carry on from my large corporate career into my tiny corporate career.
I'm a manager here. What's the best way to avoid becoming a PHP and keep myself honest?
The best way to avoid becoming a pointy-haired boss. I would say get some training. I did an OU degree in professional management when I first got appointed as a manager because I thought it would help. It did help a lot to teach me how to cope with some of the things that I hadn't come across before. So I think getting professional management training, especially if all you've ever done is engineering, is a good plan. No. In my experience, big companies promote to management from there in development, and I'm really only talking about development, promote from the development ranks, and no, you don't. Oh God, no, it's not fair to say you don't get any training. You get some training. But it is training on how to implement the company's management policies. It's not really, that's not, it's just not useful. You need training on, the kind of thing we did on the OU course was understanding different sorts of motivation factors and, trying to understand how people get motivated and that it's not carrots and sticks and stuff.
I was a bit slow in getting the joke on the backlog grooming, but I was wondering what strategies have you used to encourage bringing Scrum into a large corporation, because they do sort of think of it as quite weird.
Okay, well, and actually in my last two teams at IBM, we used a sort of corporate Agile process. About as close as you can get to Agile in a big company. And I wasn't a manager then, and the people that introduced that process were senior technical people. And they just did it by persuading the company that was the right thing to do. So you need good senior technical people who are going to go and explain, and it's at a really, you need to explain at a very senior technical level what you're doing is the right thing. and it takes a while to get through. But it is just having those as kind of in your organisation. You need an evangelist to move things forward, and they will take senior technical people. By the way, the development teams also were pretty sceptical about Agile at the time that we introduced it. So you also need the evangelist to pull those teams into line and try and explain how it works, why it's a benefit. And even then, in a big company, it's very difficult because you still have the executive at the top that wants the progress towards the delivery goal, and so you have to have some kind of adapter in between. Yeah.
Question, sneaking in. Can a non-technical person ever be a good manager of a technical team?
Yes. If you want an example of that, I'll give you a brilliant one. Does anybody work with the London Java community? No, probably not. Okay, let me just tell you, the London Java community is run by a guy called Barry Cranford. He has about 2,000 people signed up over the last couple of years. Barry is a recruiter. He is the most non-technical person you've ever met. But he got around him a group of technical people, and he managed that technical team to create one of the biggest and most successful Java communities. So there is somebody wholly non-technical managing a very technical community. It's not a software development project, but they are doing things like, they're working with Oracle on the JCP stuff, and Barry is overseeing that and providing help, sort of facilities to do things. But it is a case of a completely non-technical person doing something brilliant by managing a technical community.
What about delivery? If you are responsible for delivery as a manager and you're not a non-technical person, what then?
A really good manager will assemble around them technical people that they trust, that can explain to them in a way that they can then explain it to other managers and senior executives what the status of deliveries are. I mean, it's you don't have to be technical to manage a team well. You have to have people you can trust, and that will trust you.
So what sort of qualities would you look for in a person to actually hire a manager?
It's all of those kind of... who went to Yuna's talk? Right, not enough of you. It's all of the left, I think it's the left brain qualities, the intuition, understanding how people work. It's that kind of quality. I think that exactly the wrong sort of person to be a manager is somebody who, well, I mean, somebody like me who's spent their life looking at data and algorithms, and because you can't, your brain is hooked into that. You can't take it away. And if you try and apply that sort of stuff to managing people, it just doesn't work. You get very unhappy teams.
Have you managed to work with good technical people who've made a transition into becoming a good manager?
Where did that question come from?
Here.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I'm making generalisations a bit. There are good technical people who have become good managers. It's just not the majority. It's a minority.
So any particular skills or processes they go through to get to that point?
No, I think they just have those personnel skills before they start, and they happen to have the people skills and be good at the technical stuff as well. But they're not, like me, obsessed with the technical stuff. You know, they use both sides effectively.
I have to say I recognise myself when you say people who spend their lives looking at data and have then tried to become managers. But we certainly have projects where the actual process of creating the product is an incredibly creative one. And what I found quite interesting is when you were saying about the need for people to have the freedom to be creative. What do you do when a product which had a very creative gestation then becomes a mature live product that then requires people to turn into a production line to just keep it going and maintain it and support it?
Well, that's a difficult problem, and it's. I don't know that I really have a good answer for that. I mean, just because you're not just because you're supporting a product. I've worked with teams in IBM. I mean, IBM has massive support problems, and it's very dull. But I have worked with good, well-motivated teams that are doing what you might think is a very dull job. But they have good managers, and they end up being happy doing it. So it comes back to this thing of a good manager will motivate a team no matter how dull the job is. And that's a really good trick. You can do it. But I know you're a good manager because somebody gave me quite a good reference for you. So.
Yeah. I've come from from both sides. I've been the technical lead who was promoted to the manager. I've also been the upper management who's gone to the cat farm and tried to manage them. If you're serious about becoming a manager, you don't know how to argue and you don't know how to negotiate at the corporate level. You have to go and take classes. They'll call them business organizations, and they'll call them negotiation skills. But if you're a technical person, you're going from a position where you've been playing fish to playing bridge, and you really need to have good classes at both those. Otherwise, you will be slaughtered, and you won't know what happened until you're out on the street.
Yeah, it's education again. Get somebody to teach you what to do because it's not intuitive.
I really very much believe that you can have a good manager at a bad company, and that you can have a good company with bad managers inside it. And what I tend to try to do is really ideally look for both. So my question for you as developers, how can we kind of find out how to look for those the good managers as an employee, which people don't often. It's kind of reversing the typical way of thinking.
Are you saying, as a developer, how do you find somebody who's good to work for?
Yeah, I'm like, if you're a developer and you want to be happy in your job and you're good and you want to find a good situation with a good manager at a good company. So what kinds of things? I think that good developers should be weeding out, should be looking for the good managers, not like, because you usually think about it the other way in hiring, like,
yes,
seeking out.
Okay. So I don't know. I don't have a really good answer. I mean, what I did in IBM was move jobs every 3 years, and I spent a bit of time before I moved job looking around at the organisation and looking at the person, and it kind of trying to figure out whether somebody's a good manager when they're interviewing you. It's quite hard. You know, it's. Yeah, but in the end, I might have been. I mean, I guess there are different sorts of people. I always knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I was going to do it. It didn't matter what my manager did. I was going to do it. So I didn't need much guidance. I didn't need much motivating. I just get on. So in a way, it was a little less important for me. Yes. Yes. The worst manager, the absolute worst manager I've ever had was somebody who micromanaged me remotely by phone. Awful experience.
Yeah, I've got a bit of an answer for that. From my experience of being interviewed, and something I've tried to take into interviewing, if the manager at interview stage takes an interest in you personally, it's a good sign. If they seem more interested in whether you're filling the requirements of the job, and they don't take any interest in you personally, whether you're going to be happy in that job, that's a bad sign.
Well, I was just going to say, and also reference checking. You know, if you're speaking to different people, talk to people who maybe have worked for them before and see, you know, ask them questions, the same kind of things that matter to you.
Any further questions? Yeah.
Hi. When people do we've had the debate of whether you should be a manager or you should go down that path, but if you do take the step of going from developer to manager, one pitfall I think is that you can end up doing your old job still, and you can be a developer, and that conflict.
Well,
do
you
you have any
can't.
sort of advice on how to avoid that?
Yeah, just stop it. Don't do it. Take 2 weeks break, a month's break between jobs, and don't even attempt to do it. Also, a good principle, any job you're doing, is to line up your successor, because you're not going to want to do it forever. So in fact, that's a good general principle for every job that I've done. I start in it for a year, do it for a year, and then the third year I am trying to find somebody to replace me, so that at the end of that year I can go on and do something else. And that's always been, that's just a pattern that I figured out. I figured out I was going to want to change every 3 years, so I figured that out.
Yes. Would you say with Agile and Scrum, if it's working well, you get less problems with managing teams? I mean, the team itself is a bit more self-motivated and organisational. Do you have less problems with bad managers?
So my experience of Agile is that the biggest thing that it does is makes people feel responsible for what they're doing. And that's really what you want. A good team, everybody knows what their job is and they feel responsible for it and they're delivering. And that, to me, that was the biggest change that I saw between the waterfall processes and when we started introducing Agile processes. And it made a huge difference. Really, I mean, it's worth doing for that alone. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been developing for about 10 years. Mostly in PHP, but a lot of my experiences are not being managed properly, particularly. And I'm very lucky now to actually work in a very, very good environment for a good boss. But one of the great successes that we've done is pair programmed.
Yeah.
And it's a huge benefit, not only for things like blaming. There's no blame because there's two people doing the problem, and all of the rest of it. But I found that really motivating, and that's it's more of a statement. Sorry, guys, it wasn't really a question, but just to share that.
Any further ones? Okay, thanks again, Zoe. That was very insightful.